So the 2025 Worldwide Threat Assessment Report by the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency is out, and today we're going to discuss what this report says, from drugs to terrorism, what U.S. challenges are, and of course a very serious situation that is developing across multiple continents. So let's begin. Well, according to the WTA report, the first major domestic challenge the U.S. faces is illegal immigration from the southern border. The flow of migrants has decreased this year, but it remains a significant concern. Criminal cartels and even terrorist groups exploit migration routes to infiltrate the United States. In fact, just recently, individuals with potential ISIS ties were arrested after entering through the southern border. And the report says that over the next year, ISIS will probably try to conduct high-profile attacks in the West, similar to the group's attacks in France and Belgium approximately a decade ago. Drug cartels like the Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation Cartel continue flooding U.S. communities with deadly fentanyl and other narcotics. Despite some recent drops in seizures, over 86,000 Americans died from fentanyl overdoses in 2024 alone. This is a national crisis fueled by lawlessness just across the U.S. border. The second thing the report says is that the U.S. faces a great threat from unmanned systems like drones, surveillance balloons, autonomous vehicles, and many more, because it's difficult to figure out who is using an unmanned system and whether they pose a threat, making it easier for bad actors to operate under the radar. Unmanned systems are also dangerous because they can be mass-produced very easily and at a cheap price, like Iran's kamikaze drones. These systems can quietly gather information about sensitive sites like military bases or critical infrastructure, like power grids and water plants. And any mass attack using such weapons can overwhelm traditional defenses, especially as their range, payload, and battery life continue to improve. Well, to counter this, the U.S. is working on the Golden Dome, but that's a long story. Now the United States, still the world's foremost military and economic power, is being simultaneously challenged on all fronts by a growing coalition of adversaries: China, Russia, and North Korea. I'm focusing on these because they pose a genuine threat to the U.S. Other countries are either not significant threats or ones the U.S. can handle fairly easily. Let's begin with China. Under the leadership of Xi Jinping, Beijing has made it explicitly clear that it wants to replace the United States as the dominant power in East Asia and eventually the world. From military drills near Taiwan to economic coercion of U.S. allies like the Philippines, China is deploying every tool, military, cyber, space, and economic, to reshape the global order. The Chinese military now has over 900 short-range, 1,300 medium-range, and 400 ICBMs, many of them capable of striking U.S. assets in the Pacific. The PLA conducted dual aircraft carrier exercises in the South China Sea and is preparing for a Taiwan contingency by 2027. What's even more concerning, China's push to build global logistics hubs. From Ream Naval Base in Cambodia to a growing presence in Africa, Beijing is positioning itself to strike U.S. interest from multiple theaters. In cyberspace, Chinese hackers, backed by the PLA and the Ministry of State Security, are pre-positioning for attacks on U.S. critical infrastructure, including power grids and water supplies. This is not theory. In 2024 alone, multiple alerts were issued about backdoors placed in U.S. systems. And in space also, China now has over 1,000 satellites, with plans to rival SpaceX's Starlink. It's launching ASAT weapons, conducting electronic warfare, and even manipulating orbital debris, activities that directly threaten American satellites. Now, let's shift to Russia. Though bogged down in Ukraine, Russia is not out. In fact, 2025 has seen Moscow increase defense spending by 19%, now consuming 40% of its federal budget. The Russian Navy, less affected by the Ukraine war, is expanding its presence from Latin America to the Arctic. Nuclear-capable submarines and global exercises like Okean 2024 are part of a broader effort to maintain strategic deterrence. In cyberspace, state-backed hackers like those from the SVR stole terabytes of sensitive U.S. data from companies like Microsoft. Proxy groups are hitting water and energy infrastructure in the United States successfully. These are not hypotheticals. These are successful penetrations. Now, the wild card, North Korea. In 2024, Pyongyang fired its largest solid-propellant ICBM and then launched 18 short-range missiles in a single salvo, its biggest ever. Kim Jong-un's regime has reactivated its nuclear test site and continues to produce plutonium and highly enriched uranium. It is also operating offensive cyber units for both espionage and financial theft, frequently collaborating with criminal hackers worldwide. Even in space, North Korea is catching up. With help from Russia, they now have a basic satellite in orbit and aspirations for anti-satellite capabilities. One of the most overlooked battlefields is the polar regions. Russia has long treated the Arctic as a strategic buffer, and now, China is making its move, with icebreakers reaching the North Pole and a new Antarctic base capable of collecting signals intelligence over U.S. allies. The recent joint Coast Guard patrol between China and Russia in the Bering Strait marks the northernmost projection of Chinese maritime power ever recorded. So this data paints a sobering picture. The United States is not facing just one adversary, but a loose coalition of China, Russia, and North Korea, each with unique capabilities and strategic objectives, increasingly aligned in their desire to weaken American power. The question now is not whether the U.S. will be challenged, but whether U.S. is prepared. Militarily, cybernetically, strategically. Because the future of global security depends on who controls the new frontiers, and it's a race the U.S. can't afford to lose. Thanks for watching. Hope you all have a wonderful day.